Okay, welcome everybody. I see everybody joining us, so I'm going to give everybody a chance to settle in and so that nobody misses any part of the great conversation. So I'm going to chat for just a couple minutes and fill a little time while everybody's getting settled in and finding the link for this wonderful conversation that we're going to have tonight between James Lee Burke and Michael Connelly. A couple quick housekeeping things before we get started. Michael and James are going to talk for about 30 minutes. And I know that we've all been doing Zoom for a long time, but for those of you that maybe haven't, to submit your questions, go ahead and scroll over your screen. And at the bottom, you're going to see a Q&A button. Go ahead, Michael will be facilitating those questions. So go ahead and pop those questions in there and we'll get to as many as we can. We've got a lot of you coming in tonight, so we might not be able to get to all of them, but we'll get to as many as we can. Also in the chat of the, over there in the chat, we'll be putting in how to order the link for While Supplies Last of a signed copy of Cleat by James Lee Burke. So we'll get those out to you. If you are joining us, that is from the United States. If we have some international folks, I'm sure there's a way you can get this book, but unfortunately not from Warwick's. And just real quick, a little bit about Warwick's, who's hosting this tonight. We're located in La Jolla in San Diego, California. We've been in business since 1896, so we've been around for a little while. So if you're in the San Diego area, we'd love to see you. So I have to do my due diligence. I think all of you who are here tonight know these two gentlemen, but I have to I have to earn my keep here. So just really quickly, as I mentioned, it's just an honor for us to have these two gentlemen with us. They have been huge. They're huge Warwick's favorites. So we're just so happy to be able to host this tonight. As you all may know, James Lee Burke is a New York Times bestselling author, two-time winner of the Edgar Award, and several other awards. He has authored 40 novels and 2 short story collections. Michael Connelly is the author of 38 previous novels. So Michael, you got a couple more to catch up with there, I guess, including 3 #1 New York Times bestsellers. His books include the Harry Bosch series, the Lincoln Lawyer series, and the Renee Ballard series. He is the executive producer of 3 television series, Bosch, Bosch Legacy, and the Lincoln Lawyer. With that, gentlemen, have a great conversation, and we'll see you in a little bit.
Well, James, nice to see you. Get to talk with you again. It's, you know, I'm always in awe of you. I'm always amazed at how you seem to raise the bar every time. This book, Cleat, is a little bit of a departure, and yet it's not. I mean, this is a character, Cletus Purcell, who's been part of your Roba show books basically since book 1 or day 1. But it's been a long time that I think people have always probably whispered in your ear, like, what about a book about Cleat? And here it is. What happened? What made this happen right now at this time?
Well, I think it's more of a lynch mob rather than just 23 books narrated by Dave Robichaux. But no, I really appreciate you being there, Michael. And you're absolutely correct, though. Just many people tried to encourage me, and I just didn't do it for whatever reason. And I wasn't sure that it could be done because both men are dependent on each other, that one is really the other half of the coin. And I've always thought of that. And then I began to think a little more deeply into the possibility. And I thought, well, they're still going to be together because Dave is in the story. It took me a long time to figure that out. But anyway, more seriously, I thought it was time to look at what Dave has been and what the 2 men have accomplished, but also to give Cleat to explain what is the more tender side of himself, that he's lived a violent life, but it's not his fault, and he's help. Uh, he takes a different kind of oh it's like what is it, the term, to do one's inventory, to look at his own soul, and he goes into depression, and uh, some people call it the long night of the soul, or all the many clinical terms, but it's literally hell on earth. And people who have been through that, and if they're listening to me now, understand it. But it's very hard to make others to understand it. But I think Cleat does a very good job of it. And of course, there are some, oh, anyway, I don't want to give away all this story, but it's a very good question, and I wish maybe I had given Cleat a little more access to the world. So we'll see what happens.
That's cool. Well, I mean, you know, you write other characters and you're very diverse in your storytelling, but as you said, it was like 22 Robichaux books where the story is carried through his eyes, through his his filters, and that's what's delivered to the readers. And then you change the angle; it's like a different camera angle on the same character, through Cleat's eyes. And can you talk a little bit about the challenge of that, like bringing? I mean, assuming there is somewhat of a challenge of bringing your readers to a different angle on Robichaux.
Yes, well, on the first page, Cleat addresses the reader, and he says, Dave Robichaux should have been a Catholic priest. And because he did not become a Catholic priest, he's messed up his whole life and gotten into all kinds of trouble. And people like me have to protect him. This is Cleat's vision of things, that he's taking care of Dave, whereas Dave thinks he takes care of Cleat. But they're both men of honor, and they both abide by a code, and it's the code of the night errant. And they make a visit actually back into medieval times in this story. I think it's it's an ambition of mine to write about the Joan of Arc, but again, I don't want to give away too much, but I think it's a grand book. I may be biased a little bit.
What do you think? Yeah, I mean, Cleat gives us new insights into himself for sure. But do you think he gives anything new insight into Robichaux? I know he views himself as Robichaux's protector, and Robichaux, we know, has always kind of carried Cleat. But is there anything in this book that where you think like, hey, that's gonna surprise them when they see this take on Robichaux?
Well, I think that Cleat has maybe a broader understanding of what in effect is again of a sense of dread, and not and in effect being rejected, and he has never been able to overcome the problems that he had with his father. And that Cleat grew up in the Irish Channel, as it's called, and he came from Irish people. There was a huge influx of Irish people in 1840 in the slums of New Orleans, and it's still like that. But anyway, that both men suffered as children, but the father of Cleat was very severe. He was an alcoholic, probably lived had a or abused childhood himself. But Cleat is actually a tender man. He's far more sensitive than people are aware because he's an enormous fellow and he's tough, golly Moses. But he's also kind and he has a tremendous amount of empathy for the others that he grew up with. And we meet one of those guys that Cleat tries to help out, but instead the man, his friend, who spent what they call double nickels, 10 years in Angola prison. Angola prisons, hell on earth. That penitentiary, probably many people listening here are not familiar with that name, but there are over 5,000 convicts doing life, life and life and life. They never go out of there. And I did some work years ago at Angola Pen, and it's anyway. I don't want to get into again a lot of details, but anyway, I always have thought that maybe Cleat is not only just simply a reflection of what is called the trickster in mythology, the guy that gets even for the rest of us, the figure in medieval mythology. But it's time for Cleat to make a visit there. And we do that in this book. We go back to the 14th century or the early 15th century, I forget.
Do you, speaking of the 14th and 15th century, there's some grand ambitions in this book that you pull off. And do you have a sounding board, or are you just in your room there and you write what you want? I mean, do you ever say to someone, hey, I'm thinking about bringing Joan of Arc into a contemporary detective story?
Well,
who do you bounce that stuff off? Just yourself or what?
I obey my neurosis. It has never failed me. And that's it. I never know where a story is going. And I've always written that way. And I have no idea in the world what the characters are about to do next. And it's always been that way with my work. When I wrote my first novel, and I finished writing my first novel, Half of Paradise, when I was 23 years old, I used some notes in some of the chapters, but I have never done anything like that since then. I do things at night. I keep this right here, this little guy right here, and I have them all over the house. And yeah, oh golly Moses. But yeah, these are the little guys. This is my night's work at 4 a.m. And there are 2 novels that are in this, but they're things that I think about in about 4 o'clock in the morning, and then I write about them later in the day. And I take it all the way till about 11 at night. That I usually put everything down, and that's it. And that's I'm lucky now, and you and I both. I mean, we know what it is to work all day and then try to write a story. There are lots of things that you can do when you're tired, but write well is not one of them. So to be able to just write all the time, I mean, just write on a Kleenex, in the cafeteria, or just, and also, when you can live as a writer, as an artist, there's just, to me, a sense of freedom and also a bonding with a great part of the world. I mean, many of the people, my characters, in some way or another, I've seen them, but they haven't seen me. I remember when I was writing my first novel, there were two black ladies sitting behind me in a bus in Houston. I was a pipeliner then. I was on my way to work. And I heard this black lady talking behind me. And she said, Lord, it was cold last night. When that sun go down, it gets cold at night. And it was so rhythmic. And she had a voice better than mine. But it suddenly struck me. That's an iambic line. It's the upbeat and downbeat. And these people they're talking in a language like it's like angels. And this was in 1960 and there was this color line and white people. I was sitting on the white line with these two black ladies behind me. But I'll never forget them, those two ladies. That's it. That's it. That's why the blues are the blues.
Well, talking about language, there's been a few questions come up from the audience, and I kind of mentioned it beforehand. I love reading your books for just the prose and there's so many lines in this book that strike me, about like their laughter sounded like a song and things like that. But I also love listening to your books because of Will Patton and his multi different takes on the voices of Louisiana. And I just was wondering, do you have any relationship with him? Did you ask for him, or because he seems to get your characters so well? And now, this book with the leading voice being Cleat, being the narrator, even he's like, I mean, I always loved the way he did Streak, the way he did Robichaux, and of course he's Robichaux in this book, but he's mostly carrying it through Cleat, and it's pretty fantastic.
No, I've never met him. I've always written him or passed on the word how much I appreciate the work that he has done. And I understand that he's from South Carolina and he's very good at dialects. And for years and years and years, I guess if I added it up, literally millions of people have said the same thing, that they love what he does. And I've never met him though, but he seems like a nice fellow.
Yeah, he's a good actor.
Yeah, and a good actor. That's right.
There's a track of spirituality that runs through your books, and it's here as usual. I just wanted to ask you about two things that I've come across in the book. One is actually your dedication to Nils and Amy Lofgren, and you thank them for the spirituality you brought with you from the spheres. What are the spheres?
The Spheres. Oh, okay. This is the E Street Band. I couldn't quite hear you.
Oh, sorry.
Nils, you mean the musician? Yeah, it's dedicated to him. He's a really fine fellow, a really good human being. And the E Street Band has reached up into with the angels and brought down some of the best music in the world. And that was my compliment to my friend Nils. Yeah, he's a really nice guy, and his wife is.
At some point in the book, Cleat and Robichaux kind of confront this guy. I think it's in Mississippi. Kind of a bad guy named Hap Armstrong, and with a matter of words, he becomes unhinged. Words from Robichaux, and I'm just going to read this one paragraph, then ask you: is this Robichaux in a nutshell? Is this the theme of most of your books? So he says, "Do yourself a solid, Mr. Armstrong. if you got baptized and you're on the square with the man upstairs, you can lay down your sword and shield and not fight the war anymore. What is that? What's the message you're sending to the readers? I know you're sending a message to Hap Armstrong, but what's the message of your book there?
Okay, this character is from Mississippi, up there on the Pearl River. And he's a former Klansman who was haunted by the explosion of a Baptist church with a black congregation, and he killed children. And that was going on all over the South in the early 1960s. And I've seen those people, and I've seen them in police uniforms. And people talk about the devil sometimes, and I've never had that. This is how I put it. Someone asked me, is there such a thing? And this is my response. Dave says this, in fact. I don't, I've seen enough in the breast of my fellow man without searching for the devil. And that's what it was back then. People have no idea what it was like. I've seen and heard people things. I don't talk about it. I just don't talk about it anymore. I put it in the books, but this character is a man who is haunted. Remember the guys who blew up the Birmingham Baptist church? They killed 4 little girls, I think, and blinded some. Phew, God, the governor of the state went to one of those men's trial and shook hands with him for the cameras. Governor of the state. William Faulkner was, just he could hardly handle it. You know what I mean? Anyway, but that's it. It's something that's hard to believe that lives in your fellow man.
Yeah, I think you had that question through this book about is there a seed that we can't get rid of? Another thing that is a scourge is a contemporary scourge is fentanyl, and that's a part of this book.
Yeah.
And Cleat has had a tough time with substances over his years and so forth. And does his own history help him become the guy who is really driven to take on the bad people in this book?
Yes. All right, this is an opportunity for me to maybe do a solid for somebody. Just if one person out there hears this and in some way helps him with a problem or with his child, listen for that just one moment and let me tell you what occurred in my life. It will be the 4th year of my daughter's death, Pamela Roberta Burke, one of the most beautiful human souls that I've ever known. And she died of that drug. And it's coming up 4 years. And it didn't have to happen, but it's out there. It's 100 times more powerful than heroin. And so if you can do something to turn someone else away from getting into that world, this is the time to do it, because you can't run the tape backwards.
It's well said. And I think, when I was reading this, I could feel that from you, that you're getting that message into this book.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Cleat again. And maybe it was in other books, but in this book, he talks about his harsh isn't even the right word, his abusive childhood, and I don't even know where you come up with this stuff, having to kneel on rice all night long, things like that. And can you talk about, I mean, he's a bundle of, contradictions and issues and so forth, but at the end of the day, he's this fierce defender of the vulnerable. And you see it all through this book, right from the beginning when he rescues the stripper from that guy he grew up with, more or less. And can you talk a little bit about that, and about how we take what has happened to us in our childhood and either take one path or the other. And the path Cleat chose still has him stumbling a lot, but it's the right path.
Yes, and he he confesses early on. He took money or juice, as he says, from the mob. He worked with some really bad guys in Vegas and in Montana, when the bad guys actually were really awful people. And they broke Cleat's hand in the door. But anyway, the bad guys on Flathead Lake in West Montana got in the airplane and they were going back to Vegas, except they ran into the side of a mountain because somebody put sand in the gas tanks. And Cleat has never owned up to this. But actually, he explains it in another place, that he meant for these guys to be to have their transportation taken away from them before they could get out of town. But anyway, he did not mean for them to fly away, to get out of to lift off the ground. But anyway, that's why who's perfect? But he said, I think he explains it finally and says that right after the crash into the side of the mountain, he says he thought he was going to take a tour, or a passenger boat up to Alaska and go back and open up a private investigating business. He said it's time for him to broaden. Golly, I got a tooth I had pulled, and I'm sorry, but it makes my jaw sound like a canyon. Jeez. It whistles. But anyway, but Cleat is just a really wonderful guy.
This happens every time. You laugh your way through stories about plane crashes and toothaches and stuff. I don't picture you laughing as you're writing, though.
Yeah. But anyway, I think that probably all of us remember there was one person in high school who would do anything. All you had to do was ask. And he was the guy that got rid of whatever problem you were having. But there's always that fellow. And so I think that the trickster, and out of medieval history, and I think many of the what are kind of what would you call it? Well, I guess more or less, it's just that there are people who have a heart that they, in some way, my mother put it this way, and she was my mother was 100, she lived to 102, but right before her death, because my mother could really, golly Moses, be tough. But anyway, she said, Jimmy, the only problem you ever had is you never could be mean. he said, you had a heart that would not allow you to be mean.
That's pretty nice.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna ask, we got some questions coming in here. This one's very specific. Do you actually have the old classic Gibson acoustic guitar as has been mentioned and described in multiple novels?
Oh, yeah, I do. Well, I've had, yeah. Uh, my oldest guitar that uh, I've had since 1965. I bought in Kentucky, and it's the J40, J40. Oh golly, my head went blank. Anyway, uh, my heavens. Oh, golly. It's a D28. I've got, oh, gee, anyway. I'm,
What you ought to
yeah,
do,
pardon?
you ought to prop one of those guitars behind you when you do these things.
Yeah, well, that's a good idea. I'm in a dungeon, literally. That's what my wife and I call this place. And we call it the dungeon. And it's like, oh golly, I don't know, Quasimodo. Yeah.
But that's the spot,
Swinging on the bells, geez, it's a really primitive place.
and
I don't let anybody see it, but this is where we have a ranch, and I have most of my guitars over there. But I've been picking the guitar since 1960, and I'm one of those guys who just finally learned how to play the Wildwood Flower. I'm a little better than that, but I was not born to be a musician.
but yeah, this place in the dungeon, is that where you write your books, where you're sitting?
Well, yeah, we're staying in town a little bit, but we live what I think where we live, where our real home is about 15 miles from here. And we, oh, it's just, I mean, Montana is just, it's a love affair. You remember that's what, a great writer said, it's not a state, it's a love affair. You fall in love with it. Louisiana is a beautiful place. They're the places we got to save.
There's a writer, just sent in a question, Michael Lister, who writes about not too far away, the Panhandle of Florida. Wants to know if you can share who some of your influences were as a writer.
Oh, gee, the most important, I would say, were the naturalists. Certainly, was it James T. Farrell? Studs, what's that character? Anyway, I think Nathaniel Hawthorne, I believe, was the first, mystery writer, and certainly, Ernest Hemingway, William Faulkner, undoubtedly. I think William Faulkner's Shakespearean man. It's just I read the Hardy Boy books when I was a little boy. That was in the early years of I knew I was going to be a writer. No, I always called myself an artist. I was a very young child, and I always felt I was going to be an artist, and I never was interested in anything else. And I was a bad student in school because I just didn't like school. It was boring. And then in college, I met John Neihart, the poet who wrote Black Elk Speaks, and he had an enormous influence on me. And golly, he was a spiritual man, but there's no I had a teacher who taught really taught me penmanship. And John Neihart, between those two, they created me. I
And
can't claim anything.
I should, someone, it's not a question, they just said, Andrew Selsky said, I hope your message about the dangers of fentanyl get across and save some lives. God bless. So a good question here is, after so many years of using Dave's voice, did you have trouble keeping his voice from bleeding into Cleat's?
No, that's never been a problem. I've always thought about them as being separate, although what bonds them ultimately is the ethos. They both share what we admire most in human beings: courage, charity, decency. And I've talked to people who wanted to write screenplays for those books, for the screen. And I've always told them the things they do and they don't do, and they understand. But and neither man ever used God's name in vain. Let's see, they never use rough language in front of women. They never are abusive toward any people. And in other words, their faults are their faults. And people talk about, well, violent men. They never use violence except in the protection of others. And there's an enormous discrepancy between that and just sadistic material that I can't read. Watch many of the films that are on television. God, how they scare me. I have nightmares.
Yeah, I mean, that's very clear in your books about when Cleat and Dave, when they go into action, it's usually as defenders of the downtrodden in some way. There's a question here, were Cleat or Dave inspired by anyone you know in particular, or are they amalgamations of lots of people you know, including yourself?
The latter, yeah, that's it. Yeah, they are. But they are a mix of really fine people, and as I say, it's charity, and they're patriots, and they're always kind to other people who cannot be kind for themselves. And of course, they I think they are the Jeffersonian representation that comes out of the Shakespearean theater, and that is the nighty rant, as they were called, Chaucer's nighty rant. They use strength only for what is either a divine or a social cause that one is willing to perhaps forfeit his life, to actually decide that there's an ideal that is greater in importance than my own life, and to be able to do that. One of my best books is Wayfaring Stranger. And it was based on my cousin, who was a war hero in the family. And I always thought of him as the Nighty Rant. And I still do. He's passed away now. But what those fellas did, I mean, going through the bulge, and anyway, I'm getting into other things. But I have written a number of books about my mother's family.
Yeah, don't you have a Holland book coming next, or Can you say what's
Yeah,
happening?
and it's loosely based on my mother. But man, it's Wemmeroo. It's called Don't Forget Me, Little Bessie. Man, it's great. It is great.
I'm glad it's so refreshing to see you be excited about a book. How do you keep that excitement going?
Well, I don't know. I can always say it's neurosis. It never lets you down. It's always with you.
So here's a good question that Brian Miller sent in. They recently erected a statue of you in New Iberia. Are you ever going to get down there to see it and pose with it?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. We'll see it. Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. It was a great honor. Gee whiz, there's a lady from Houston who was the sculptor, and I was very she's a famous person, but it's very expensive. It's $100,000, and man, I don't know if I'm worth it, but it's a beautiful statue. I'm afraid it's right there on the square on Bayou Teche. It's right in the center of New Iberia, and but I know also that in the spring, all the robins from the north fly back into South Louisiana, and all those birds are going to be around my if you'll notice that picture of that statue, there's a hat. I have a hat on.
They're going to need it. That could be like an Easter egg. You got to like write a scene in a book where Robichaux goes by the statue by Bayou Teche, and
Yeah,
people will know what that statue, who that is a statue of.
I didn't think about that. That's great.
So I don't even, you're kind of a wayfaring man too. And I know that you've lived in Los Angeles, you've lived in South Florida. In fact, your daughter, I found out recently, your daughter Alifair was born in Fort Lauderdale, where I kind of grew up. You've lived in Wichita, so you've been all around. And James McClenny asked the question, why Louisiana? Why did you pick Louisiana to be kind of your signature place, so to plant your signature character of Dave Robichaux? Obviously, he has a Cajun name, but why Louisiana?
Well, my family's been there since 1836, including me. I mean, I went out in 1836. Right on the bayou, the Burke family, 1835. No, it was 36. And I grew up in between Houston and New Orleans along the Gulf Coast. So, but I always believed that this is the way I thought as a kid. I lived in Lake Charles, Lafayette, New Iberia, and Houston, and New Orleans. But that was the world when I grew up, and I had a wonderful childhood as a consequence. And it was what I still think was my generation is a passing generation, that we will not see what we call the historic America. That's just one guy's impression. But no, I've always thought of Louisiana and Lafayette as my home.
You showed us a little notebook that you say you write in the middle of the night. There's a question here about that notebook, and you're known for these, at least you're known to me, about these amazingly literary passages of descriptions and of the souls of people. do these come to you when you write them down in that notebook, or do these just come out of you when you're sitting there writing the novel?
No, they're more, oh, more inclined. I have a peculiar way I write, and I've never understood this, and I try to explain it in various ways, but I don't know where the story comes from. I don't know the characters. Probably with some time, I remember an aggregate of people of years ago, and I say, oh, wow, that's where that guy came from. But that said, when I write and write, and then it becomes part of the whole, WHOLE, but then it will disappear. I don't remember the writing later. And I go back and I read it, and it surprises me, but it surprises me. And that's the way it's always been. And so that's why I've always felt that there's something else in the creative act, that it has, oh, this is the way I think of it. And the words don't come from me, they come from two other men. And William Faulkner was thrown by his horse and he died after that, and he knew he was going to die. And someone mentioned something to him about his, they were glad that he had done what he had done as an artist, but he corrected the man. And he said, had I not written the books, another hand would have written them for me. And Ernest Hemingway, I knew his brother. I was good friends with his brother, Lester, that Hemingway, 2 nights before he took his life, called Hadley in Florida, his first wife. And he said a strange thing had happened to him. He had resurrected or found the manuscript of The Old Man in the Sea. And he said, I reread it, and it was like someone else wrote it for me. Same thing that Faulkner said. And again, I mean, Ernest Hemingway was not an humble man. When he starts telling people, this is too good for me to have written, that's change of pace. But anyway, that's it. That's it. I never understood it. Do you know anyways.
No, I think, well, we're out of time, but I think that's a good way to
Oh,
answer it. It is a mystical thing. It's
that's it.
Defies
That's it.
description.
That's you said it. You said it.
It's a great way to end. Michael,
You want to take it from here?
thank you. Michael. That was an excellent conversation. And if I can ask one thing of the two of you, because we have fans of both of you that have been in this audience, and it's a great audience that we have here. How did you two, and I'll let either one of you answer this, how did you two meet, and how long have you known each other?
Oh golly, I think he said 35 years. And
Well, we've been in the same orbit for 35 years because I forget which book, but I discovered James when I read Neon Rain, and it was either that book or the book that came after was dedicated to his agent. And so when I had a manuscript that I thought should be published, I sent to his agent, because if an author, you never know anything about this world of publishing, but if an author thinks enough of his agent to dedicate a book to him, he's got to be a good agent. And so I ended up getting the same agent as James Philip Spitzer, who's passed on now. But and then I got the James Lee Burke ride. He got me, Spitzer got me the same editor, same publishing house. And then of course they sent Jim the manuscript, and he gave me a wonderful blurb. So JLB, as I call him, has been a critical part of my career. And then I think we actually didn't meet in person till you drove into LA and did a few book signings in the early 90s. And So we've known each other since then.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great relationship. And Michael is a really fine and great man, a great writer.
As
I-
you both are.
I've been proud that I've gotten emails from Jim where he calls me Podjo. So you can't get anything better.
I
That's what Cleat says.
I love that. James, your laughter is infectious. Everybody was saying that in the chat.
thank
It's
you.
been wonderful. And Michael, to your point, this publishing world, who can figure it out? But what we can help is keep buying both of your books so both of you continue to keep writing these great stories. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And we'll see you soon.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
You're a good hostess. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.